Hello, everybody. Welcome back to an episode of My Thoughts. Back here. It's been a little while since the last My Thoughts, I know, but I know I said to get back on track with everything. This is just one of the things, of course, our annual My Thoughts for the Super Bowl. I'll be talking about the Super Bowl. This year's Super Bowl 60. Patriots Seahawks, a rematch of one of the earlier Super Bowls, of course, classic. Um, yeah, just, our annual thing. If you watch here on the channel before, we have some annual traditions here that I'm trying to get going. And one of them being is, every year after the Super Bowl, a week or two afterwards, I'll be doing my thoughts on it, talking about it. So, it's a pretty big event, of course, Super Bowl wise. Plus, I like sports, all that good stuff. Done past couple Super Bowls for a while, so just continuing on the tradition here. So, just going to get right into it, be talking about it. It's our first My Thoughts on an episode in a while, that's what I was saying. Trying to get back to my thoughts. Like I said, it just kind of depends on if there's stuff I have to talk about and whatnot, and there is quite a few things. So we'll be wrapping up my thoughts episodes in the coming weeks and months, I guess, if you will. Kind of starting off our comeback with this, just because the Super Bowl just happened. Plus, it's our tradition. So yeah, just trying to get back into the swing of things, channel wise, getting some things started back up, some new things. As I was saying before. Yeah, so I'm just gonna get right into it. So the Super Bowl 60, of course, like I was saying, it's Patriots Seahawks. Of course, very different teams as to when they were, when they were matching up last time. Of course, you have Drake May and Sam Darnold, two unlikely quarterbacks and teams. I would say, I never had Seahawks Patriots come into the Super Bowl again, um, especially with the kind of teams they had. A lot of people didn't think that would be the case, but of course, it was the case, and they did pretty good. I think, honestly, the Super Bowl, to start off with it wasn't the best game, honestly. I'm going to be, pretty critical of it. It wasn't the best game. I'll be, going through the usual stats and whatnot. It wasn't the best game, It kind of gave me the 2019 Super Bowl between the Patriots and the Rams kind of vibes, and the, where all they did was field goals. That's kind of the impression that me and a lot of other people got, I would say. Just because there's a lot of field goals, to end the first quarter, it was 3-0, and then I'll be reading the score by quarter pretty soon, but that's an important statistic to get into. But overall, like the most of the game was majority low scoring until like the a little bit of the third and the fourth. So to get into some stats here, we have so score by quarter. First quarter, of course, as I was saying, 3-0. 10 in the second quarter, 6-0, and then the field goal by Jake Myers. There was a lot of field goals here. Third quarter field goal, 12-0. So it was all field goals until the fourth quarter when there was a touchdown pass from Sam Darnold, caught by Barner, 16 yards, touchdown, and the extra point was good. So I'm just kind of reading it off the internet here. So they only scored a touchdown. Seattle, at least Seattle did, in the fourth quarter. So it was all field goals until the fourth quarter, as I was kind of saying. So that was kind of like, it was like a slow build up Super Bowl. I think it was overhyped personally, and we'll be getting to some of the other stuff there. Personally, I think it was overhyped. I think it definitely wasn't the best Super Bowl, and I think a lot of other people would agree. And then as the fourth quarter goes on, Patriots score another field goal, touchdown again by the Seahawks, and then the final score, touchdown by Drake May, pass short complete by Ramondre Stevenson, touchdown, and then the final score being 29-13. Seahawks win the Super Bowl, which is kind of crazy. I never really felt the Seahawks would win the Super Bowl this year. That's definitely not, like I was saying, things that a lot of other people would have thought. But yeah, the Seahawks won the Super Bowl. Kenneth Walker III was he was the Super Bowl MVP. He did very good this season, I think, overall, and continuing in the playoffs in the Super Bowl. But I honestly did not think that Seahawks Patriots would be this year's Super Bowl. I thought the Eagles, honestly, as an Eagles fan, I thought they would repeat or get pretty close to repeating a Super Bowl, at least appearing in the Super Bowl. Maybe not Super Bowl champs, but I think they would at least appear again. Of course, a lot of people thought the Chiefs going into the season, but obviously, as they were phased out of the playoffs, that wasn't the case. The playoffs this year in the NFL, I will say this: they were very, it was a very open game. I feel like anybody could have won the Super Bowl this year. Any team, and that team just happened to be the Seahawks. And it was good to see a new team win the Super Bowl. It was really good. It's been the Chiefs for so long. Even the Eagles have also been in the Super Bowl a couple of times. It's always been the Chiefs for past couple of years, at least on the one side. So it was really good to see a new team or fresh team win the Super Bowl. So definitely, there's a lot of people who didn't like it, but me personally, I think it was good to see a new team win the Super Bowl, at least on that part. It's good to see two new quarterbacks, that being Sam Darnold and Drake May. They both did pretty decent job. I know it was a low scoring affair, but I think everybody did a pretty decent job. It's first Super Bowl for a lot of these guys, and it was an overall good teams. The teams were good, just the scoring affair and just the low scoring wasn't really that good. It made it kind of a not the best Super Bowl, but it was kind of a slugfest, really, kind of slow going, nothing really, not nothing too fast paced. So really wasn't the best Super Bowl, but in terms of the teams, I like the teams that were in it. I think they both deserved a chance at winning Super Bowl. So I think it was a really good one. At least that being the teams, as I was saying. So yeah, then I'm going to read off some statistics here. Of course, Sam Darnold had 295 passing yards, 2 TDs, 2 interceptions. Kenneth Walker III had 135 yards, rushing yards, that being compared to Drake May. Cooper Kupp, of course, winning his second Super Bowl. He had the one Super Bowl with the Rams. Of course, he had 61 yards, kind of low scoring for everybody all around, low yardage, just because most of it was field goals. Then it started to pick up in the fourth quarter, so that's just explains those statistics. But overall, not too much, at least on my part. I don't have too much thoughts to give on the Super Bowl. Overall, just a very slow, kind of sluggish Super Bowl all around. Not very high scoring until the very end. But I think good on the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks deserve a nice Super Bowl. I think Sam Darnold deserves a nice Super Bowl, especially after being with the Jets, and which is a horrible time for him, I imagine, and every quarterback that the Jets are in. But yeah, it was really just slow overall Super Bowl. Nice time, I think. Of course, it was in Santa Clara, Levi Stadium again, returning after then the Broncos did have a chance to make it in the AFC playoffs again after being in Super Bowl 50 with Peyton Manning and all that. They won that. But unfortunately, with Bo Nix out, just kind of commentating on the playoffs, they couldn't win that. So a lot of people said that the Patriots basically were given their Super Bowl, and all that Mickey Mouse schedule and everything. I personally disagree. If you're in the sports, you know what that means. But I personally disagree. I think both of these teams are very deserving of a trip to the Super Bowl. Of course, only one can win. I think the Seahawks also very well deserve, the Super Bowl. So overall, decent Super Bowl. Kind of, it wasn't the best Super Bowl, but I think in terms of, there's levels to it. I don't think it was a decent Super Bowl. I think it was a very, low key kind of Super Bowl. Wasn't really that, slow scoring and whatnot in those terms. But I think it was a decent Super Bowl in terms of the teams and kind of, being able to see new teams in the Super Bowl. I think that was good, and that's what made it, helped out a lot, because if it was the Chiefs and another team that had been in the Super Bowl a lot of times, I think, and if it was like that, I think it would have still just been a worse Super Bowl overall. But considering that there were new teams to see and whatnot, I think, I think it was a pretty decent Super Bowl overall in terms of the teams. But yeah, so kind of confusing there, but hopefully it makes sense. Mike Macdonald, head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, I think he also is another coach that's really deserving of the Super Bowl. I think along with all the other guys, I should say. But yeah, I think he also very well deserved it along with all the other guys and the whole team. So I think Seattle definitely deserves the Super Bowl. I think I think they're very deserving of this year's Super Bowl, I think. So that's just another thing I want to throw in there. Yeah, of course, we're going to get to the other good part of every Super Bowl, the Super Bowl halftime presentation and the show and whatnot. Of course, Green Day opened up the Super Bowl, which I think was really cool. I've been a Green Day fan. Green Day was really cool to open up the Super Bowl. They did that. They played some good songs there. So I like Green Day. It was cool to see them open it up along with all the other celebrities that are usually there. Of course, Bad Bunny headlined the halftime show. I'm just going to say, it was headlined with a lot of political controversy and all that stuff, I personally, I'm not really going to get into the politics of it. I mean, it's a halftime show. I have my own opinions on it. It's a halftime show. I'm not really here to tell you guys whether you should have liked it or not. Shouldn't have liked it. It was a very politically charged halftime show going into it. I don't think the actual performance was as political as it probably could have been. But I'm not here to tell you guys, politically differences, all that stuff. I have my own opinions. I'm sure you guys have your own opinions on it, but it was a very politically charged, subject, the halftime show, just everything with Bad Bunny. I'm not here really talk about that. Me personally, I think it was a good performance, even though it wasn't in English. I think it was a cool performance. That was another majority of the controversy. I personally think it was a good performance. I'm sure people are going to not like me for that, but I mean, that's just my opinion. I mean, I think it was a fine performance. I don't really see why everybody had an issue with it. I do and I don't, but I mean, I just think it was very, I think that sports really shouldn't be, so politicized, especially just a halftime show. So, I mean, I'm not really going to get into all of it, but that's just my little short opinion. Of course, as I always say, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, especially regarding that thing. So I'm not really going to encourage you guys to go one way or the other. Whatever you thought about it, it's fine. I think it was a good performance, pretty decent, and that's really all I'm going to say on the matter. There's been a lot of other halftime performances that, should probably be more controversial than this one. I think there have been more, controversial halftime performances, so I think that perhaps people just overreacted, but that's just my overall opinion. I think so. But yeah, I mean, I have my own opinions, but I'm just not gonna, but interestingly enough. But yeah, overall, the halftime show was good. I think it's cool that also, like I was saying, Green Day performed. As far as the performances and whatnot, I think it was an overall good Super Bowl performance, leaning that way. Shouldn't have been as politicized as it was, but it was, and it just is what it is. I mean, I can't really change too much, but whatever you guys think, you're entitled to your own opinion, and whatever I think, I am entitled to my own opinion. So I mean, it's either way, I think we could have a friendly discourse here. Especially that's what my thoughts is all about, just having a friendly chat about this. I give my thoughts, and of course, you guys are always welcome to give your thoughts about it in the comments. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I have to say on the matter. But overall, just in general, the Super Bowl was kind of, it was also clouded with all that political controversy. I'm more or less mainly trying to focus on the sports aspect of it and just strictly kind of stay unbiased as best as I can, while also kind of giving my straight opinion. But of course, this is my thoughts, so I'm going to be giving my thoughts. But my point in saying is, I'm not here to tell you guys which political way to go or whatever you should think. It's just friendly conversation about something that happened. I think that's what it should be. But regardless of all that, overall, it was a decent Super Bowl. I think met with some controversy and whatnot, but it was overall, I think, overhyped, and just for what it actually was. But overall, there were also some good times there that I also liked. There's some cool things in there, cool plays and whatnot, I think. And it was just an entertaining thing to watch. It was entertaining overall. Commercials were decent. There was also some controversy with the commercials being AI and whatnot most of the time, and also just some controversies with the commercials. I enjoyed some of the commercials. Some of them were good. But they were also kind of subpar, in my opinion, this year. So that's just, something else to add on Super Bowl festivities-wise. And, but overall, it was I would say my scale for the Super Bowl, my final thoughts on it would be it was a mid Super Bowl. There was good times, and there were also some also things that weren't as good about it. But yeah, overall, I think it was a mid Super Bowl, mid to high tier. I think there were some really, there were a lot of highlights, but there's also some mid things in there that I also didn't really like. So it was a midish overall Super Bowl in my opinion. And those are my final thoughts on it. So, of course, we have our annual. This is an annual thing we'll be doing here. So, I'll be coming back for Super Bowl 61 next year, which will also be in Los Angeles, California. So, that's pretty interesting, I think, as they just had a Super Bowl there, not just a couple years ago. So, we'll see who ends up there. Hopefully, the Eagles, but how that goes. But yeah, that'll pretty much wrap it up for today's episode of My Thoughts. We're going to be coming back with a lot more of My Thoughts amongst some other series in the coming months. Just stay tuned. We got a lot of new stuff coming. Stay tuned for all that, mostly leading up to summertime. So once it's summertime, we'll be also releasing a lot of new stuff. But I'll have some little projects here and then from like coming up to here to a summer. So stay tuned along the way. Of course, be sure to subscribe for more content, like the video, all good stuff, Discord, Twitch, Instagram, Twitter, links in the description. Very important you stay updated with all my social. I've been posting more on there if there's like any special announcement. I'll be posting on the community tab, Twitter more specifically, and the Discord. Mostly I'll post announcements and any updates going on, so stay tuned. Be sure to follow all of those. Of course, leave a comment down below what you thought of the Super Bowl overall, good, bad, whatever it is you thought. Let's have a nice friendly discussion in the comments down below. But yeah, for now though, I will see you guys in the next video.